Okay, hello. It's about 4 o'clock, so we're starting a couple of minutes late today. But welcome to our online Q&A Claromentis drop-in session. Thank you very much for coming and for your time this afternoon. I'm Holly, and I'm trainer at Claromentis. And just to kind of explain the format of today, even though I'm sure those listening and here will kind of already know it, but it's always good to say it again. So today's session, we're going to answer some questions that we've had sent in over the last week or so. And then if we have any time at the end of the call, we're going to open up to any questions. We always seem to run out of time though, so maybe I should remove that from the format. But still, if we have some time, we will definitely do that. And then also just to apologise, we haven't been able to squeeze one of these sessions in over the last few weeks, but we're hopefully now going to have a slightly calmer schedule and start doing one weekly again. Okay, let's get started. And today our first question is all about CKfinder and pretty much managing images on the intranet itself. Now this question comes from Nicole. And I kind of vaguely know a little bit about how images are quite heavily used in particular some intranets, particularly quite strong graphical images, lots of different sizes and shapes, all of that kind of thing. So it is a constant thing that makes a massive impact on the intranet, because we all know lots of visual kind of clues and content is great for the site and makes it look good. So usually when you're playing with images on the system, you will probably be embedding them into publish pages, news articles, knowledge base articles, and all of that kind of stuff. So the way that we most often do that is pretty much always using CKeditor and then in turn CKfinder. So let's just have a look at how that looks in various applications. So if we go to the news application, we come over here to publish a news article. And let's fill out our information here. So let's say welcome to, actually let's say successful drop-in session, hopefully. Oh, spelling mistake, that's never a good start. Then underneath that, obviously we know that we've got our abstract area, which we can drop a little piece of text in, but we've also got a content area. So if we select this text radio button here, it will show us our rich format editor, which is our CKeditor. And not a lot of people know that it's called CKeditor, so it's quite good to try and kind of familiarize yourself with what it actually is and what it does. And there's a lot of information about CKeditor and how it works available on the internet in general. So it's always good to have a look for that if there's any particular things that you can't do or want to know how to do as well. Of course, as well as having us to help you with it as well. So you should all be kind of familiar with these new buttons. If you're still on a slightly later version of the software, maybe 7.1 or 7.2, the CKeditor will look a little bit more picturesque than it does now. So in 7.3 and onwards, we have this new streamline kind of content CKeditor, lots more silver, a little less color in the icons that you see. But traditionally, you would embed an image by using the image button here. This would then allow you to either browse the server, which would allow you to look at any images that you've already uploaded to this particular application. Or of course, it allows you to upload an image to the content that you're trying to edit from your local machine. So the process for this is pretty much the same in all of the CK editors that you will use. So if we jump to publish and have a look at that, you'll see it's the same there. So let's just find a page to edit. Let's find one here. Oops. One with an edit link would be useful. So let's go back to publish and find one in here. And you can tell we've got quite a complex example publish structure here. So in here, let's click on team. Let's check those pages back in again, I think. All right, so let's cancel some of this. Brilliant. So if we go to About Us, oops, that's not good either. Oh, I did jinx it by writing the successful news article. Okay, let's just go to knowledge base and have a look at that. So the process is pretty much the same. When you're editing some content, you will see the CK editor. So in here again, let's edit that. And down the bottom, again, there is the process. So Nicole's main question is there a way to access the CKfinder image library without going into editor image browse server? So effectively, editor image browse server is effectively into CKeditor, opening up that image tab, and then having to click here to have a look at this particular library that you're working with. Now, this kind of behavior where it opened up in a separate tab for me is completely browser based. So sometimes it will appear in a window like a pop-up, and other times CKfinder will open up in a new tab. So CKfinder is an extension of CKeditor in that it will display various content from around the system that has been uploaded, and this works in different ways depending on what application you're in. So for example, if we click on CKfinder and browse server from knowledge base, it will show us the images that we have uploaded to knowledge base. And if we close CKfinder in here, if we go to news, likewise the same thing will happen again. So one of the kind of tricky things about CKfinder is that there isn't a simple way to get directly to browse all of the images that you have uploaded to each individual application. So really, when you browse the server, what you're looking at are images that you have uploaded to a particular application. So we're going to add a page in here just so we can have a look at it in Publish as well. So let's just add a little test page. So choose our template. Let's call this drop in, and we're going to call this CK editor. So now when we edit a content area in Publish, and again we can go to the image button there. If we go to Browse Server, you'll see that these images look completely different from the ones that I saw in knowledge base. So there's less of them, and obviously they're different. We can all see that. But the one thing that all of the editors have in common, or the finders have in common rather, is that on the left hand side you have this folder structure, and in here you can see we've got publish, we've got documents, we've got people, and gallery, which is image gallery, and all those kinds of things. So it can be quite confusing about how this works, but effectively these folders have content that allows you to link or embed a link to that particular area in the intranet. So it isn't really a space to store all of your content images for the entire site. It's more just dedicated files that you've uploaded to each application, and then in turn you have the ability to link to different areas of the intranet using this folder structure. And the thing to note there is it's not always about content, it's more or less about linking things out of CKfinder or into your content area that you're editing. So for example, one thing that does come up from time to time is rather than adding an image, for example here if we say see Holly's profile, oops, what we can do is we can actually highlight that, and instead of using our image button, we can use our link button. We can browse server there, and this helps it make a little bit more sense. You can see we can click on people, and then I can put a little link into my profile there. So there is some confusion about the way content and links work together, but effectively when you are browsing to the server and using that CKfinder, that file structure down the left hand side is about linking content rather than embedding kind of like live content from other areas. And this is something we're kind of like looking into and exploring in terms of how we can maybe make that a little bit better, or what we can do with that. But at the moment, that is how it works and is standard functionality. And you can see here after I've created that publish page, so we'll just have a quick look at that. So let's just say created page. So if we just have a view of that page, you can see I can click on that link and it will take me to that person's profile. So not their image, not the content that's behind their profile, just a simple link out of that kind of area to another area of the intranet. So that kind of explains the process in terms of what that other content does on the left-hand side in that file structure. But Nicole, there isn't anything you're missing in terms of an easier way to get to or browse the whole image kind of library, or the CKfinder library. It very much is just on an application by application basis that you will view that content. That said, though, there is one place that you can manage files for particular application, and that is in Publish Admin. So this is the only application that allows you to do this. So if we go into Admin and into Publish, so we're not in the front end, we're in the admin area. Over on the right-hand side, underneath Utilities, you can see there that we've got Manage Files for Published Pages. Now, if we click on that, that actually takes you to the published page content itself. So this will look familiar because when we try to embed a page on Publish or embed an image on Publish, this is what we saw. So from here, you can actually build out folder structures. So we can right-click, and we can move things around, etc. So you can start to kind of delete these, etc. Whoops, let's go back again. So you can delete these. My right click, there we go. My right click's a little bit delayed. So you can see you can actually kind of delete them, download them, rename them, resize them, etc. So there is a little bit of management that you can do with publish files in CKfinder, but nowhere else around the system do you have this sort of access to move things around. And of course, over here, if we have a look in files, oops, there we go. So my right click is a little bit slow, but now you should see it. Now we can add subfolders and kind of arrange content and images that way. So hopefully that clears up that question-ish. Is there a way to access the CKfinder image library without going through editor, browse server? At current, no, but you can manage those files for published pages only in admin publish, and then manage files for published pages over in utilities on the right hand side. So another question that Nicole has, basically still about managing images on the intranet, is there a way to move an image to a new folder without breaking the current link to any news stories or blog posts that the image has been uploaded to? So this is the case where, let's say we have uploaded an image to a news article, and then in CKfinder we move that image into a folder. So if we go into news, I don't know if I've actually added any, but let's have a look. So if we just go to content, okay, there are a few. So in here, what this means is that you can effectively use or repeatedly use images that you have used before. So if we write one article, we can then replace it and use this image again over and over again. So if you move these, unfortunately, there's no way to move it without breaking it, because you're actually breaking the place where that image, or the path of that image on the server. So there's no way around that. If that's the case, you then would have to go back into those articles or blog posts and re-link up that image or re-embed it again. So unfortunately, that's not a great answer to that question, but there's kind of no way around that. If you move a file and it's linked somewhere else, that link will break, and the only way to replace that or change that is to relink the file up again, which you can kind of do in news. You would just find it again in the folder that you're working with, or the one that you've moved it to, and just embed it again, really. And this question kind of moves on to the next question from Nicole, actually moves on again to working with CKfinder and moving images around. So the question is, can you bulk move images to a new folder? And no, unfortunately, you can't. So here, for example, if I have a new subfolder, and I'm going to call this desks, because I seem to have a lot of example pictures of different desks, because, you know. So if I try and kind of grab a couple of these, you'll see that even if I hit shift and try and select multiple, I can't do that. So it really is a case that you kind of have to move individual files like this, and it will then update that file for you. But there's no way to kind of drag and drop multiple ones. If we try and do that, you'll see it just doesn't like it, won't let us select them. Okay, so yeah, so that's Nicole's 3 questions. So hopefully it's given you a bit of an idea about how the kind of expected functionality of CKfinder should work and CKeditor. And I mean, CKeditor is a massive part of your life if you are a content manager or content creator. And it is definitely something that helps you create some quite lovely pages, and I think now with the ability to upload videos from YouTube, to include different file types, to embed lots of different things, you can really create some really lovely articles, pages, etc. So it's definitely worth spending some time getting more familiar with it and the kind of amount of things that you can do. And also, just a little tip, in Publish, in the new CKeditor, let's go and have a quick look at that. There are a few new buttons, so I'll just point those out for you so you can have a quick look at those. So let's check that out. You'll see we've got a few additional buttons here, so you can start to actually add things like radio buttons and checkboxes to your publish pages, which are quite cool. A little bit like a form, I guess. You can start playing around with all of that. Okay. All right. So let's move on to our next question. So I think Scott is with us. Brilliant. So what I'll do is I kind of go through the question, and then if I kind of get it right or get it wrong, I will open up, unmute Scott so he can tell us if we're kind of there or not. But today's question from Scott is all about InfoCapture reporting. And InfoCapture reporting, and actually InfoCapture in general, is a very vast application. And in many ways it's vast but beautifully complex, in that you can kind of make it work with whatever business processes that you have. And its ability to be customized is kind of, is pretty massive. So actually effectively what you end up doing is building your own sort of application over and over again. And also, if you kind of are not familiar with InfoCapture, InfoCapture is our business process management application. And effectively, it's a place for people to build e-forms, collect data, have those submitted, and is a really good tool for streamlining any processes you might have, and also getting rid of paper and being a bit greener, which everybody loves. So the question today from Scott is really about InfoCapture reporting, which is a sort of whole entity in itself. So we have our projects which we build and our e-forms which we build, and then on top of that you can run quite substantial reports about the information and the data that you capture. I do love that pun. Anyway, so the kind of first question from Scott, or the way this started, was the capabilities of reporting InfoCapture. So if we could walk through how to create a report, and the kind of options that you have there, which it's totally possible, and a few other questions just to kind of give us a bit of context. So Scott has a report which is a web form with department fields, or a department option in a select field. So you go in, you submit a form, and you can choose a department. I think that's right. So then what we'd like to know is, well, how many times is department A, department B, department C selected? What's the kind of percentage count? And also running reports for a date range as well. And then lastly, the last question is it possible to export that information out of Claromentis into a CSV file? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a kind of introduction to InfoCapture reporting, and we're going to look at running a couple of example reports. Obviously, we're going to run the example report that Scott has mentioned, but also just from kind of more of a general look at about how it works. So yeah, so let's do that. Okay, so the first thing I kind of like to point out about InfoCapture reporting is that when you are working with reports, you quite often do that from the front end of the application. So in order to run a report, you go to InfoCapture in the front end, and then over here on the right hand side, you will see a small reports button. Now that in itself is subjected, or well, yeah, it's subject to the permissions you have on a particular project. So for example, your general users won't be able to come in and see the reports page. It is a permission setup that is available on individual projects. So I kind of like to start, before we jump into running a project and setting up a wizard, on just how to give people access to be able to run reports and view the reports page in general. So if you're familiar with InfoCapture, you'll know that the building and the kind of configuration of reports, or the configuration of projects, there's such a fine line between the word project and report at the moment. I'll get it back. Hold on a second. So when you're building projects and building forms in InfoCapture, you do that from the admin panel. So all the kind of configuration happens in the back end, and the result is this streamlined, lovely process for your front end users. So we're going to go to InfoCapture in the admin panel. And before we jump into the report, I'd just like to mention this tab that is hidden or behind the projects tab in the InfoCapture admin panel. And this tab gives you the ability to provide people with the permissions to create public reports. And all this means is that the people who are in this box can create reports and then share them with other users. So if you have a situation where you want to create reports and then you want to show them to other people, your name needs to be in this box. So that's just the first step to bear in mind when you start working with them. And this is across the board, so you can see that this is actually a part of the admin panel and InfoCapture rather than individual projects. This is for everything. So the next step is to go into the project that we're working on, and we're looking at this Employee of the Month project. And it's a very simple form where people come in, they can nominate a user, fill out a bit of information, and then submit that. So the first thing we're going to look at, we're not really going to look at any massive project options in here, but we are going to go to project permissions. Because in project permissions, underneath project roles in our rights area, is the ability down here to allow your project roles or your user groups within InfoCapture to view the reports page. So if I want to run a report, or I want to put one together, I need to have some sort of access down here to view reports page. And then when I have that, when I go to the front end of InfoCapture, I will be able to see the reports page and the reports button. So make sure that's all set up before you get started, because there'll always be a point where, permissions, as we know, are at the heart of everything we do in Claromentis, and they always catch you out from time to time just to keep you on your toes. So that can be one that sometimes crops up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and we're going to create a report and run a report for this Employee of the Month project. So I'm going to leave the admin panel and go into InfoCapture. And incidentally, quite a nice thing about having the permissions for viewing the reports page a little bit separate, or having to go to the front end of InfoCapture to run a report, is that this means that actually people who maybe you don't want to give full access to a project can run reports and pull data from InfoCapture projects, which, as if you do build InfoCapture forms and work on projects, you'll know that it's very difficult when lots of different people are trying to manage and have access to lots of different forms. So it's always, quite a nice separation of the two things. We have our admin permissions, and then to run reports and view data, you can still do that without having control over everything. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the reports button, or we're going to click it up there. You'll see that you can see it in the main kind of area of InfoCapture, but if we click into a project, you can also see it over there. So reports is a kind of bit of a general area really, where all of the reports or a certain amount of reports will appear. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do then is we're going to set up a category, just so I can kind of categorize these reports really. So categories are completely up to you, and they are just a way to purely organize the reports that we create. So we're going to add a new category, and we're going to call this something like employee of the month. Employee of the month, there we go, and then hit save. And you can see, oops, name failed reserved. Oh, I've already got one, I think. So let's say employee of the month. There we go. Perfect. I'm going to get rid of that older category as well, because we don't need that. Let's delete that. Perfect. So we've got our first category in there, and as you can see, there's not really a lot to categories. If we go back and edit them, you can see it's simply just a title, and then we can delete that, or we can update that if we want to. So that's that really. So if we go back to the reports page, you'll see that we need to set those up now. And we can also switch to list of categories there as well. So we'll view that there. Right, so let's start a report. So the report wizard allows you to set up your report, configure all of the options that you want on the kind of conditions to run that report around, and loads of options there. So to get started, you click on add a new report. And then this is broken down, as you can see, into 7 steps. So the first step is for you to define or decide what will be the source project for this report. So what is the kind of InfoCapture report that you want to run this information about or collect data on? So in here you can see I've got a list of all of the projects that are available in the system at the moment to me, and I'm going to choose employee of the month and then click next. So our second option here is pre-filter options, and this area is the place where you decide which fields, if any at all, should be used to pre-filter your report information. So let's say we create a report that pulls down all of the information from our InfoCapture project. We can then have a pre-filter option that says, right, I want to actually filter all of my data by department or team or status. I can do that now. So pre-filter options is all about having some sort of active pre-filter before you run the report. And these are very, very useful because obviously you can define and choose which values are pulled out at this point before you run the whole report. And we're going to come back to this in a moment. But the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to run a report that has all of the data on the system. So we're going to come back to here in a moment. So the third step is fields grouping, and this is where you choose which fields should be grouped together to show you a kind of total number of related issues. So for example, if we want to know how many tickets or submissions or forms are on a particular status, or if we want to know how many times or a particular team was selected, etc., we would do that here. Now, the one we're going to use for this particular report, and you can see we can quite happily skip through different steps at different stages to get different kinds of reports. But viewable fields is very important because obviously viewable fields are the fields that are returned in the end report. So in here we can start to pull down all of the information from fields that we have in our form. And then at the top it gives you a nice little warning that says this can't be more or can't include more than 60 columns, which is pretty cool, but it's up there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to select all of these fields because I want to pull down all of the data that is in my particular report or my particular project. I'm going to click next. And then post filter options. Now this is kind of 9 times out of 10, you will not have the option to actually input any post filter options. So post filter options will only appear if you have one or more kind of area or one or more instance where one or more fields have been grouped together and there's some sort of aggregate function in there. So if you group lots of fields together, they also include an aggregate function, you'll get some post filter options. And they're literally what they say on the tin. After you've run the report, what can you do after that? How can you filter that information out? So it allows you to kind of refine that information a bit further. And then step 6 is result sorting. So we'll come back to this when we run a second report in a moment with a bit more specific details. But effectively, again, it's what it says: in which order should we sort the results that we get from the report. Now, when you're making a report or running a report that pulls down all of the information, so all of our fields are viewable, we don't necessarily need to sort the results, because the likelihood is that we're going to export all this data and then it's going to go to a CSV file. But for argument's sake, let's just choose ID, because reference numbers are, a big part of InfoCapture when we submit things. And then, of course, we can choose direction as well. So that's how our report will run and appear. Then we click Next. And our final step is Save. And you'll notice at this point that it's possible to preview your report if you want to, and also to go back steps. So you can jump back and change things whenever you want. So you could preview. If it's not quite right, you can go back again and change different options. So let's click Save and save this report. So I'm going to put it in my category, and I'm going to call this all data. And then I might say all information from employee of the month, and then hit save. Okay. So now what we have in our reports list is the name of our report there. And you'll notice that over on the other hand side, we've got these small icons over here. So the first thing we're going to talk about is running or executing a report once you set it up. So once you've gone through that wizard, when you come back to this reports page, you simply click on the title of the report that you've created, and that report will run. So what it's doing is it's pulling down all of the fields that I selected as viewable and bringing them in and running a report for me. And you can see there are my project IDs. There's the ID in project and all of that information in there. So obviously this is great if you just want to collect all of the information from a project very quickly. You can also see at the top that you have the ability to download a CSV file for that report. Now, Scott, I hope that answers one of your questions in advance, which is it possible to export any data into an Excel CSV friendly format? And yes, it is. And quite often, it's quite interesting how people use reporting. I've seen some instances where people kind of want to stay away from downloading a CSV, and they have lots and lots of InfoCapture reports for different times and lots of pre-filtered options, which means they can actually choose specific information without having to download to a CSV and sort that. But obviously that's not how everybody works, and things aren't always that straightforward. So you also have the additional ability to download a copy of these files or these reports, and you can view them. So if we open that up in Excel, hopefully it will do it smoothly for me. There we go. So you'll see in Excel, once it loads, a little bit of a drum roll, there we go, you'll see that all of that information is pulled out into a CSV file. So you can continually take reports, you can save them to a CSV file, you can share them with people, you can run your own reporting, you can generate your own kind of statistics, pie charts, whatever you want, and you can obviously do this and back this up regularly as well. And obviously the CSV files are great because it means that people who maybe don't use InfoCapture that often but need information about projects or data that you're collecting can kind of have a readable format, so they don't need to go into InfoCapture reports, etc. And you can download a CSV file for all of the reports that you run. So let's jump back to there. Oops, there we go. So this is an example of all information that's pulled down. So let's just go back to the reports page and think a little bit more about how we may want to use this. So obviously all data is great if you're downloading to a CSV and then you want to sort that information. But what happens if you want to sort all of the information before you run the report? Well, this is where you use pre-filter options. So what we're going to do is we're going to start again, we're going to add a new report and we're going to choose again the Employee of the Month project. Click next, and our pre-filter options are going to be our team. So Scott, this would be department team, that kind of thing. So in here, what you can do is you can select the condition of a particular field. So you can see here we've got things like is equal to, is not equal to, is greater than, etc. And if you work with InfoCapture, you'll probably you'll be a little bit familiar with this sort of kind of vaguely mathematical terminology to get processes and conditions and triggers started and up and running. So for example, here we can say, right, team is equal to, let's say, accounts, but really we're going to allow people to select this option. Now here, this box allows us to provide a more kind of human-friendly word for whatever field we might have. So team isn't a great example because obviously team is pretty friendly as it is, but ID might be a good one. So where we have ID in project, we might say, right, is equal to this particular ID, and then we might translate that into something like reference number for our everyday users who are running the reports, just as an example. So we're going to scroll down here and we're going to click next. We're not going to group any fields in this instance either because we don't want any counts, that's fine. And then we're back to our viewable fields. So we're just going to choose a few of these this time. I'm going to go with team and probably status. There we go. So I've not gone mad, but we've got quite a lot of information there. And then I'm going to hit next. And again, you can see no post filter options because we're not grouping more than one field and no aggregate functions. And then in here, again, I'm just going to leave this blank. I'm not going to have a field to sort by because actually my pre-filter option is pretty much going to sort my report for me. So I'm going to click next. I'm going to save the report and I'm going to call this one, let's call this all data filterable. Is filterable a word? It is now. By team. There we go. So we save that report. And now what this will allow us to do, if we run this particular report, you can see whereas before, when we ran that all data report that had no pre-filter options, it just ran the report for us. It didn't allow us to choose any kind of fields to play around with or make any decisions, just all of the data all at once. But here, using this pre-filter option, we can say, right, team is equal to, let's say, accounts, run the report, and then only bring me back information that matches that pre-filter option. So here you can see I've got two instances where these two things have been submitted and the team is accounts. Again, if I go for HR, I'm hoping I might have some content in here. There we go. So we can see we can pull back the information in there about all of those submissions from or have included the HR team. So pre-filter options, all about a point before you run a report that allows you to decide what information is filtered out. And they can be super useful, especially where you have quite massive projects where you have lots and lots of data, because actually it's quite easy and you could have lots of different pre-filter options as well. So you could run lots of different ones at once and all of that kind of thing. So that's an example of all data being pulled down in the report, simply using viewable fields, selecting all of them, hitting save, and then running that report. The next example was the same kind of process, apart from the fact that we have a filterable or a pre-filter option for our report. So the last kind of, we're going to do two more. The next one we're going to look at is basically producing a count report. So all of this data is great, obviously, because it just pulls down all of that information. But there is a certain element where we have to then work out how many times the accounts team have been, submitted for an Employee of the Month award. So you can see that's not great. You can imagine with this project it's pretty self-explanatory, but if we have 300, 600 submissions of whatever form you're working with, it's going to take a while to count them up. So we're going to talk about how we get reports that generate counts for us. So we're going to go back to reports, and we're going to go to new report. And again, we're going to go through each step. So Employee of the Month, hit next. Again, I'm not going to have any pre-filter options, or maybe we should. Yeah, let's go for some pre-filter options. We're going to do it by team again. So we're going to do that same process. So we'll select by team and then hit next. Now, for our count, to generate a count, the amount of submissions per field, we need to now use this step 3, which is fields grouping. So in here, I'm going to select the field that I want to generate some sort of count for. And team is going to be the one in this instance. Then next, I'm going to select which field I want to show, which is obviously team, because that's what we're going for. And we can just keep writing team or leaving view as blank, and it will just pull that through. But really, where you see these kind of check boxes and then view as or use a parameter, all that kind of stuff, it's just about a way to make your InfoCapture form a little bit more friendly. And then we're going to just show count of grouped rows at the bottom here, and then click next. And again, you can see no post filter options, so we're going to go past that. And then I'm going to go for rows count, and I always get this the wrong way around. Let's go for ascending, and then click next. Then save, and we're going to call this number by team. Obviously, you'll be able to name your reports a little bit more, succinctly than I. So let's hit save, and then let's run this particular report. So the first thing that kicks in is the pre-filter options. So I can select accounts, run submit, and then it will show me the team, the value of that field, and the amount of times that has been chosen. Now in my pre-filter option, if I have nothing selected and then submit, it will then throw me back a list of all of the options that are in that particular select field. So there are all my departments and my teams, and then on the right hand side I have a count of all of that. And you can see from here this is pretty easy to read, but you still have the ability to download the CSV file there. So in that goes, and you can see that information there. So when it comes to, I think, Scott, in your question, you mentioned percentages. Effectively, we have counts to do that, and then obviously you would work that out from there. So it's all very kind of like number-based and, yeah, count-based, really, rather than percentages. But this should show you how many times within a particular form or a particular project that this, a selection is made in a department or team field. Okay, and then the very last one that we're going to do, almost there, the very last one is we're going to do a date range report, because this is another question from Scott. Is it possible to define the data by date range? And yes, it is. So really you can kind of define reports by the information that is captured by InfoCapture. So we're going to do it again. We're going to add a new report, and we're going to select our project. Now with date ranges, we're going to have to go with a pre-filter option, because obviously we want to select a particular date range and then pull back the content or the data from that period of time. Now you can see in the kind of left hand side here, my pre-filter options include created. Now you'll see that the created field has a date picker field. So obviously if you have built a few InfoCapture forms, you know that there are multiple types of fields that we use, and you'll see that these actually change based on the field type. So obviously team is a select field, so if we just click that, you'll see there's loads of options in there, and those are all included in our forms. And then if we have something like a simple string field, which I don't think reason is, I think. So if we go to there, you can see that there's no options in there, but I can add a value in there if I want to. So we're going to talk about date, and really the limitation here is that we can only have a from date effectively because we've just got date created. So in this instance, to generate a report from a specific date range, what we really need to do is have two created fields. So if we scroll down to the bottom of our pre-filter options, you'll see you've got this additional settings area. And here what you can do is you can add a new field, and you can, if we scroll down, you can see you can duplicate any of the fields that are above. And what we're going to do here is we're going to duplicate the created field, because effectively we want one date which is created at this point, and then we want an end date. So we want date to, date from, all of that kind of thing. So we're going to choose the created field and hit submit. And now what you'll see, let's refresh the page. Let's try again. Oh, that's not good. Let's see if it still works. We've got another one there. We're just going to delete that. Actually, let's leave that blank for now. Okay, but the point is, we'll ignore that small error at the top of the page. The point is that here now we've got date created, and then we've got created to and created 3. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set up some conditions that basically say date created. And remember, these are pre-filter options, so we could say something is equal to, or actually you want to go for, is not greater than the, let's say, actually let's go first of all with not lower. So let's go not lower than the 1st of March. And then our second field is not greater than the 31st of March. So again, using those sorts of very InfoCapture driven expressions, not greater than, is equal to, etc. What we've got here is we're using these two fields, which are essentially date fields, and then deciding the value based on this condition here. So in here, obviously date created and created number 2 is not very friendly or applicable to anyone. We're not really going to know what that means. So what we can do over here is we can select, using these checkboxes, this area for us to redefine what this field is called. So let's call this date from, I think will work. And let's call this one date to. Okay, so those are our pre-filter options. In order to generate us a second date field to give us a to date, we duplicated the field and added a new field down here. Now we're going to click next. And in here, we're going to choose team again, because basically what I want to work out with this report is how many issues were submitted for my marketing team between this date and this date. That's basically what we're getting at here. So we're going to go for team. In viewable fields, again, we're going to throw back team, because remember that created is our pre-filter option, so we don't need to worry about that. And then click next, and next again, because we don't need any post-filter options. And then you can choose a sorted field if you want, so let's go with team, hit next, and then save. So pop it in my category. We could call this team by date, and hit save. Okay, so now what happens when we click that report, you'll see the first thing that we're prompted for is our pre-filter option. So here, even though we decided not lower than, not greater than in our kind of pre-filter options, you can see that we can change that at any point. So actually, we only really need this one report to generate lots of information or lots of different reports for lots of different date ranges. So it's not a case where you need to go back in every time and create a report for a specific date period. So let's run this and hit submit. And you'll see in here that it will pull back the kind of submissions for each area in there. Now, one of the things that we don't see in there is the count, and that's just simply because I missed out grouping show count fields when we were making that report. So if we go back a couple of steps, go back into our wizard, which is the way that we edit a report, go into fields grouping and viewable fields. And at the bottom we've got show count of group rows, and hit next, and hopefully that will rectify that. And let's hit save again, and submit. There we go. So we can see, given that period of time, that these are the amount of counts that each of those team received. Now, of course, we can change that. Now, I know there's no data in there for February, so let's go back a month and add that, hit submit, and there'll be no data for that given time, mainly because I submitted all of those Employee of the Month tickets today. So you can see, though, how basically you pull information from the project, and then to get what you need out of it, you basically use these pre-filter options. So it's not uncommon that in this list of reports you will have very standardized report names, and then when it comes down to it, you can use those pre-filter options to generate a report, download it to a CSV, and you kind of have that process there. So hopefully, Scott, that answers your question about running InfoCapture reports. There's a couple of other things I just want to point out before we move on. And Scott, I will briefly just unmute you to make sure that that all makes sense. But just a couple of things to talk about here. Obviously, when you're looking at these reports, you'll see these small icons here. So the first one is edit permissions. Now, you can see here that this gives you, as the creator of the report, the ability to choose who can view and run and edit and delete a report. So pretty standard permissions from our side in terms of setting things up. But the thing to bear in mind is that when you create reports, until you change permissions, you're the only person who can see them, which can be good, but is often not that great. Run Wizard simply takes you back into the report to reconfigure it or change it or do whatever you need to do. You can copy reports as well. So if you have a particularly, complex report that you've come up with, you can copy that, make some changes to that, and then bring that back in again. And then obviously the last one, we've got info, which is pretty much everywhere, and it will just run down all of the information about that report. And then the kind of last one here is edit. So if we edit that, we can see we can just change the name of the report, description, and the category. So the main thing there really is that with permissions, the only way that other people can see your content or the reports that you've created is if you edit permissions before you start sharing them, etc. Otherwise, you'll kind of get the situation where people can't see anything when they come to the reports page. Yeah, and that's pretty much InfoCapture reporting. So it's one of those areas that if you have a very specific project to work on, or a very complex thing to work on, we would recommend that you have a little bit more training. But effectively, that's just kind of like a step-by-step introduction to reporting. So Scott, I'm just going to unmute you and check if that is helpful, or if you have any questions, and hopefully that all made sense. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely did help out a good bit. I do have an advanced or complex situation that I'm trying to work through, where I've got a number of variables that I'm trying to do some analysis on. So I probably will reach out to you a little bit after our call. So I know we're up against our time allotment now. So.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and please do that. So like I said, it's always quite easy to show these example projects, but as we know, InfoCapture is just so, can be so complex and so intricate. So yeah, let us know what you're struggling with, or if you need any help, and yeah, of course, we will help you there.
And basically what I'm looking for real quick would be, I've got a category with a number of check boxes within that category. And I've got multiple categories with multiple check boxes in each category, and I kind of want to give a grand total or count of how many times each one of those check boxes or subcategories appeared in one of the categories itself.
Yeah, definitely longer than our 5 minutes. That one, I think.
Yeah. So that is possible, correct?
I believe so. Yeah, we can run reports on checkboxes. So yeah, we'll sort that out for you, and we'll spare everyone else the InfoCapture edition. But I think what that actually shows, but I think actually what that kind of shows is actually, when you start using InfoCapture for processes, it can grow and grow and actually work very much with what you're trying to achieve, even if that is super complex. So, like, I think one of the things I always like to say when we're talking about InfoCapture or training, or when anyone's thinking about using it, is there is a lot of outlay from the back end. There's a lot of configuration, there's a lot of stuff to do, but the end process for your front end users is an absolute dream. And who doesn't like less bits of paper to fill out? It's perfect. So, all right, Scott, I will email you actually after the call, and then we can talk a little bit more about that. And
Great,
thank you so much for your question. So I'm gonna mute you again now. I feel so terrible muting everybody. It's always awful. So brilliant. So again, we had pretty much quite a few useful questions today, and as always, I send a little bit of a follow-up email after the call, which will include any bits we talked about or useful information. And also the video from today will go up on YouTube again. So if you want to review it or spend another hour listening to me, that would, you can do that to your heart's content. But we'll send that over. And of course, please look out on Discover for our notifications of new drop-in sessions. And I'm hoping that next week, Tuesday, around the same time, we will have another one. So save up any questions for then. Feel free to email me in the week, and have a lovely rest of your day. And we'll speak to you next week. Thank you so much.